All right. Well, we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone. Good afternoon. And welcome to the first event in our 8-week Voting Our Values series, our forum series. We're so happy that you're here. My name is Sarah Ogletree, and I am the program coordinator at NCIPL, which is the Creation Care and Climate Justice Program of the North Carolina Council of Churches. It is my honor to welcome you here today. And again, we're so glad that you're joining us for this conversation. First, I want to thank all of our partner organizations who have helped to make this event possible. Thank you to Green Faith, Vote Earth, the Creation Care Alliance, Charlotte Clergy Coalition for Justice, Orange Chatham Interfaith Creation Care, and Interfaith Creation Care of the Triangle. We are so grateful for your support. We could not have done this without you. And if any of you who are attending this call do not know about these organizations, we really encourage you to check them out. They're doing great work on the ground. And their information is in the chat. So as I said, this is the first of our Voting Our Values Forum events. And this event is specifically on what it means to vote on the values of creation care and climate justice. So we're going to talk about that in a few different ways. We're going to have a conversation with 3 incredible justice advocates, creation care workers, and climate justice advocates in our state. We are going to do voter education work to equip you with the tools to really prepare your communities to vote this election with creation care and climate in mind. And we're also going to talk about climate resilience work already happening on the ground that desperately needs to be supported. We also will have a Q&A time for you to ask your questions. So as you have questions during this event, please just go ahead and drop those in the chat, whether you're on Zoom or Facebook Live. And we will flag those questions and make sure that we get to them during our Q&A time. I also want to encourage you to go ahead and say hi in the chat. We would love to be able to welcome you in a more personalized way. So please let us know who you are, where you're calling in from, the name of your congregation, or your organization if that's applicable. We would love to be able to say hi to you. And all of that said, thank you again for being here. And I'm going to pass the mic to NCIPL Director, Susannah Tuttle, so that she can provide a bit more context on this broader forum series.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much, Sarah, for getting us started. And we are so grateful to see so many of you joining us for this incredibly important discussion around democracy, values, and the 2020 election. We are blessed to be able to have a reflection guide specifically designed for faith communities and people of conscience, because we understand the 2020 elections could not be more significant. The outcome will set the course on climate change for years to come. On top of that, we are in the midst of a global pandemic, a major recession, record joblessness, and our nation is in turmoil over police killings that have exposed the deep inequities and racial injustice in our nation. It is time for some national soul searching, and faith communities, as we know, have the most important role to play. That's why IPL and Faith in Public Life partnered to create a multi-issue faith voter reflection guide called Democracy, Values, and the 2020 Elections. This guide will help faith communities consider moral issues from the climate crisis to racial justice. The guide also addresses other urgent issues in the election, including voting rights, systemic racism in the criminal justice system, healthcare, peace, LGBTQ rights, and immigration. It has been endorsed by prominent faith groups and religious leaders at the national and state level, including the North Carolina Council of Churches and North Carolina Interfaith Power and Light. So our forum is divided into 8 events focused on each of these topics covered in the guide. During each of the events, we're hosting expert speakers, we'll do voter education work, and host Q&As with our audience. As we said, this guide was created with faith communities in mind, and the North Carolina Council of Churches is the only group distributing it across the state of North Carolina, but we hope that each of you are going to be partners in helping us get it out. We have pledged to distribute 10,000 of these resources guides, and during this time of the pandemic, obviously the majority of that has to be done virtually, so we hope that you will take a lead and be a champion this season to get this guide out into the hands of communities all across North Carolina. By downloading the guide, the link is in the chat at ncchurches.org/voter guide. every download counts. This is the year of the census, and we understand that every person counts, and it really matters for us to be able to track where the guide goes, who has the chance to take a look at it. So we encourage you not to just download the guide and share the PDF, but please send the link, and we promise you, you will not be added to another listserv. All we want to do is make sure that this goes to as many hands as possible. So as Sarah noted, because the guide focuses on values, we pulled together 3 champions who embody the values of creation care and congregational work. I'm going to let her introduce them and head into the conversational portion of our event now. Thanks.
Thank you, Susannah. So yes, we want to begin our time together by talking about the why behind our vote, the values behind our vote, and those values today are about creation care and climate justice. So today we have with us Pastor Laticia Godette, Reverend Scott Hardin-Nieri, and Rev Glencie Rhedrick. They are all going to be our speakers. We're so grateful that they're here. Pastor Laticia Godette is an ordained elder in the AME Zion Church and the pastor of York Memorial AME Zion Church in Greenville, North Carolina, where she made history as the first woman pastor ever appointed to any first church in the North Carolina Annual Conference of the AME Zion Church. She is a champion of social justice and environmental justice, and in 2017 founded her nonprofit organization, Laticia Hill Godette Ministries. Pastor Godette, we are so grateful that you're here. We can't wait to talk more to you. Thank you for being with us. We also have with us Reverend Scott Hardin-Nieri. Scott is the director of the Creation Care Alliance of Western North Carolina and associate minister of Green Chalice of the Christian Church Disciples of Christ. He is an ordained pastor with the Christian Church Disciples of Christ, and this work of creation care is for him an expression of love and spirit as he continues to become aware of the deep connections among pollution, poverty, violence, racism, oppression, climate change, and spiritual brokenness in the world. Thank you, Scott, for being with us. Lastly, but certainly not least, we have Rev Glencie Rhedrick. Rev Glencie is an ordained Baptist minister and womanist theologian. She currently serves as an associate minister at First Baptist Church West and is also a local and national community activist. She is the former president of Mecklenburg Ministries, an active member of the Domestic Violence Fatality Review Team, chair of the Social Justice Committee for the United Missionary Baptist Association, co-chair of Charlotte Clergy Coalition for Justice, and co-chair of the Clergy Southern Piedmont Circle for the Poor People's Campaign. Thank you also for being here, Reverend Rhedrick. As you can see, these folks are doing a lot, and they really do understand the interconnections here between social and environmental justice. And again, we are just so grateful that you're here. I want to begin our discussion today with Pastor Laticia. So Pastor Laticia, my first question for you is, how does your faith call you to care for creation and act on climate change? And what does that look like for you personally, in your congregation, and in your denomination?
Thank you for allowing me this opportunity to be with all of you today. You're doing a great work, and I'm excited about the work. I know you said that social justice and the fight for the environment is interconnected, but for me, they are one and the same. I want to talk first about our denomination. You asked, what does that look like for our denomination? In July of this year, our current president of the Board of Bishops of the African Methodist Episcopal Zion Church, Bishop Crenshaw, issued Project 100. Voting is DEEP. DEEP stands for Definitive, Educational, Empowering, and Protective. He is encouraging every member of the African Methodist Episcopal Zion Church to make sure that we are registered to vote and to make sure we are voting. It is so important for us to stress this as a faith community. I want you to understand that we also stress the same thing in our local congregations. For me, Matthew 25:40 is still a foundational scripture. Only what we do for the least of these will last. Only what we do for the least of these really matters. What I do on Sunday morning from 10 a.m. to the 11 a.m. hour is just a small part of ministry for me. God has given us the opportunity to go around the state of North Carolina to provide free COVID-19 testing to people who have been disproportionately affected by the disease in our Black communities. So I fight for social justice by doing the work, by making sure people are receiving the tests, the treatment, the resources that they need. And this is the same fight that we must have for the environment. We must make sure that everyone is completing their census. We must make sure everyone is registered to vote. And we must make sure that we go out and vote for people who are concerned about social justice, the environment, the least of these. We must be good stewards as a denomination, as a faith community, as local churches. We must elect people who understand that it is our responsibility to take care of the environment, the least of these, Black people, brown people, people who have been affected, fighting for social justice. We are in the midst of the Black Lives Matter movement. We must make sure that we understand the fight is really one and the same. Our Black congregations are upset when our white counterparts are silent and they do not stand with us to fight for social justice. Well, the environment groans when we as Black people do not stand and fight for social justice for the environment. So there's a point, as Dr. King says, when silence becomes betrayal. So we must not be silent about the environment. Our white brothers and our white sisters must stand with us and fight for social justice. And so we all must fight to make sure the least of these in society and the environment is getting justice. And so for me, it's all one and the same. And I'm excited to be a part of this fight for social justice, for the environment. And my cry, my plea is that we will elect people, Republicans and Democrats, that we will elect people who will fight for social justice, make the right decision, vote their conscience for the environment and for the least of these in the society and our communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Pastor Laticia. I love your referencing of scripture. I love Matthew 25. It's one of my grounding scriptures as a Christian, and I think it's so vital to this work of environmental and social justice, and you noting that they are one and the same. So thank you so much for that. And your prophetic call to all of us to do this work. This is on all of us. This is a prophetic calling. We all need to show up. Another question that I have for you is, I know that you live in the eastern part of the state. You do a lot of traveling, but you live in the eastern part of our state, and the eastern part of our state is particularly threatened by climate change. So how does the threat of more frequent and more severe storms influence your perspective on climate change and how your own community will be impacted?
So it brings it home for me. I was born in Asbury Park, New Jersey. My father went away to prison, and I am the least of these. My grandmother and my grandfather afforded me a new life, and we moved to North Carolina, Havelock, North Carolina. I grew up in Havelock, North Carolina on the coast. We experienced storms, hurricanes, flooding, and actually my grandparents are deceased now, and they left me their house. So my house is still in Havelock, North Carolina, even though I am living in Greenville to serve the York Memorial AME Zion Church family. My house is still in Havelock. My house has flooded 3 times in the last 7 years, 3 times flooded and has been totally destroyed. We have had to rebuild, to remodel, and I've also had family members affected by the recent storms. We have people in Bertie County right now in North Carolina, and they have lost everything. We have stepped up to adopt these families to help them get what they need, but we also must see this again as social justice work, because a lot of them are experiencing this effect from the storm because of environmental problems that increase the chances of these storms and the effect that they have. And so they all go hand in hand. We often have to deal with the cleanup, the aftermath, instead of being proactive and putting laws in place to make sure we are slowing down the effects being done to the environment, the climate, especially on the coast. We spend millions of dollars trying to rebuild houses, homes, and it's difficult to rebuild people after they have been hurt, after they have lost everything. If we would take that money and put it on the front end, to make sure that we are putting laws in place and doing real policy changes to make sure we are slowing the effects of global warming and the effect we're having on our water supply, our earth supply, our environment. Put that money on the front end. Then we wouldn't have to spend so much money on the back end trying to repair communities that have been damaged by these storms. Thank you.
Thank you for reminding us that this is happening right now. People are impacted right now. Climate change is not an issue for the next decade or the next 20 years or 50 years. People are dying and people cannot be rebuilt. So we have to put our energy into mitigation in addition to adaptation. We cannot do one or the other. Thank you so much for that. My last question to you is, how would you encourage congregations to exercise their prophetic voice? I see the prophetic voice in you. I get goosebumps when you talk. So how would you encourage congregations to exercise the prophetic voice and vote this election?
You know, I believe in speaking to everyone, Black, white, Latino, our Hispanic brothers, our Korean sisters, our everyone, all of us are connected. We are all God's creation. But I have to let you know that I preach to a majority of Black people every Sunday. Not only that, but I am a Black woman, what has been known as the underside of the underside. We're always at the bottom. And so for me, it's a lifestyle and not something that I just do on Sunday morning. I'm always fighting for equal rights and social justice because I'm a Black woman and I'm unapologetically a Black woman. With that being said, when I talk about social justice for Black women being the least of these, the underside of the underside, I must understand that we fight for everybody, including the environment and everybody. That means opening up your mouth and saying it when nobody wants to hear you say it. That means when we have platforms like these to deal with the white elephant in the room, to deal with it instead of acting like I'm not different. Celebrate diversity. Open up your mouth in your pulpit. Open up your mouth in your communities. Open up your mouth on your social media page. Open up your mouth. Use your voice as a weapon. Use your voice to speak truth to power. And then encourage everyone in your congregations, in your family, to register to vote and then go vote and take them to vote. Faith without work is dead. So even after we preach, teach, educate, encourage, if we have to get a van and put people in the van and take them to go vote, we must put boots on the ground. We must make sure that we are starting with the people around us and that we do not relent. We must be relentless. We must continue to put the resources out there. Yes, we give people a handout, but not just a hand out, a hand up. So that means educating, empowering, encouraging, and taking by any means necessary. I will not let anything separate me from voting. We must do whatever we need to do. People are discouraged. This is a pandemic. People have lost jobs, homes, people have lost loved ones. So we as the faith community must give them that encouragement, empower them, and let them know the vote still matters. It still counts. And we must elect people who will fight for everyone, including the environment. So I simply say, whenever I get an opportunity, I will use my voice to encourage, to empower, and I will take people. I will set up things and put things in place to make sure they have resources and access to go vote, and that they're educated on the different ways to vote. And I will not take for granted that some people may not understand why voting matters. Do not take it for granted. At the dinner table, I'm talking about voting. At the family reunion, I'm talking about voting. On the Zoom meeting, I'm talking about voting. In every last one of my sermons, I will not end without talking about voting, and I will not rest until they arrest Breonna Taylor's murderers. I just thought I ought to throw that in there since we're fighting for the least of these. I'm through.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. So I hear a call to radical truth telling, using all of our platforms to speak about not only the need to vote, but why we need to vote, why this still matters.
Yes.
There is so much happening in our world right now, and this cannot be covered up by all of those things, because this is, our lives are on the line. Lives are on the line. and that is why we must vote. So thank you so much, and may we all move forward with the energy to truly use our platforms and tell truth radically and get out the vote. Thank you, Pastor Laticia.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Absolutely. I want to move to Reverend Scott Hardin-Nieri. And my first question for Reverend Scott is, how does your faith influence and ground your work on climate change and creation care? And how do you see congregations responding to the climate and ecological crisis in your own work?
I'm deeply grateful to be here and to be in the same conversation with these amazing leaders of their community. So thank you, Pastor and Reverend, for your incredible work and your inspiration and your challenge to us. So my faith has been an evolving animal throughout my life. And as I have seen creation under jeopardy in a variety of ways, I have had my heart broken. Not only for the ways that I see creation being broken, but also how I have seen and witnessed my neighbors being hurt. And so my understanding of faith is this sense of call to relationship with God and with creation, with myself and with others. And as I've seen that expand in my understanding of who my neighbors are, not only to include people from other countries and other communities, but also to include creation, birds and trees and amazing wildlife that are under the ocean, in the seas, I have understood God to be manifest in new ways. And so my faith has led me to both challenge those things that are issuing death in the world, the death dealers, and then also to accompany and love those life-bearing ways of the world. And so I have so much to learn in the midst of that, and have been learning and continue to learn about how to be a life bringer, how to be an accompanier, how to be a deep listener, and how to struggle for change. And in the midst of that, I've learned a little bit more about God's creativity, the diversity written into creation of all kinds. I've learned to trust science more than ever with my faith, to trust the wisdom of humanity, and to trust that essentially there is love in the midst of all this brokenness that we have, and to call upon that, even though I see a lot of destruction and pain and systemic brokenness in the world. So that's my personal experience, and there's been a lot of manifestations of that. I see here in Western North Carolina and beyond, in my work with Green Chalice of the Christian Church Disciples of Christ, faith communities engaging in work that is an expression of God's love in creation care and social justice. And just like we've heard before, they are integrated. I think that's one of the beautiful things about faith communities, is that we are able to look at loving our neighbor and care of the earth as integrated as expressions of our faith. So just a few examples of the way Creation Care Alliance in particular have seen this kind of work in the world. I am grateful. I'm just going to tell a few stories real quick. Just one is Piney Mountain United Methodist Church. They're a rural congregation, and we're very grateful for that congregation. And they would not want to talk about some of these hot button issues in worship or in their Bible studies, and yet they love their neighbors. And so they received a grant. They bought 1,000 LED light bulbs, and they love to grow things, not just on their church property, but in their gardens at home. And they went wheelbarrow and wagon door to door with these LED lights and food, and met 70, 80, 90 of their neighbors door to door and said, can we offer this food and these LED lights? They estimate that if everyone screwed in those light bulbs, that they saved their neighborhood $70,000 over the next 10 years. It's like 1,500 trees that were planted. And that was an expression of God's love that was nonpartisan, and that was a way of caring for their neighbors. Although it was a climate solution, and it was a food security solution. So integrating these climate justice pieces. Another is Land of the Sky, and I'll talk a little bit about some of the issues that we're facing in Western North Carolina. One of them is housing. And Land of the Sky United Church of Christ is doing a lot of environmental initiatives, and one of their initiatives is around housing and fair housing. And they've partnered with Beloved House, and Beloved Asheville is building tiny homes on the property of this church in order to provide low income housing for a community that's being challenged right now. So that's an exciting partnership that we see. And then St. Eugene, as you may know, is one of the first Catholic churches in Western North Carolina to have solar panels. That just happened a few years ago, but they have been an example for the Catholic community nationwide and also for Western North Carolina around their solar work, and as well as the Peace Garden that they've created with their Spanish language worship service, where they've attracted birds from Central America that are migrating through to provide this space that is both nurturing to creation and their worship community and their neighbors to come into this Peace Garden. So those are a few examples, and I have more that I'll share later on, but I bet you have another question.
I do, but thank you for tying together, reminding us love for neighbor is love for creation. These things are interconnected, and offering your own ways that in nature you have seen God manifested more wholly, and that has given you new windows into this work and how you love people. That's deeply beautiful and certainly connected with our values section. Yeah. So my next question is, what does climate change look like tangibly in the western part of the state? And how is this impacting people and places?
So we don't know exactly what the future looks like for Western North Carolina around climate change. There are a couple of different models that are expressing a variety of pathways, and none of us really know. And that's a beauty and challenge of this work, is that it's all unknown. We do know that there is great change coming. And so what we are seeing now is that we in the western part of the state have a lot of national forests, and the lungs of North America, a part of them are here in the Pisgah and Nantahala forests. And so those are at risk when we talk about changing weather patterns, whether it's a drought that would bring more forest fires and increased soil erosion and dryness in the ecology there, or if it's flooding. And they're not sure if it's going to be increased rains or decreased rains, but the rain that's intensity and the weather events that are more extreme, bringing landslides that would impact not only communities that are living in the hills, but also communities that are living in the valleys. It destroys ecosystems and erosion, and it also can plug up and ruin wetlands and creeks and rivers with those landslides. So that's a real danger. I would also say that because the forest is such a biodiverse place in North America, it's really incredibly biodiverse here. It holds a lot of God's creation right in our neighborhood here. And for those things to be jeopardized is, again, to be hurting God's creation. And it's also an incredible carbon sink. And so that those forests that are growing naturally are drawing carbon out of the atmosphere that would allow for a stronger resilience in the future. Besides that, we have insects that would be increasing because of that would impact our forests and our people and might bring disease more prevalent to our people here in Western North Carolina. Beyond that, a lot of our economy, for good and for bad, is based on tourism. And if we don't have clean streams, if we don't have forests, then our economy will really shift drastically. And then the last, two more things. One is migration. We are already seeing from Florida and from the coasts, people realizing that this is not only higher ground, but the temperatures are cooler. There are dynamics here that are appealing. And so we want to try to figure out how to provide housing and hospitality for climate refugees. And we're already seeing those arrive here on our doorsteps. And we want to figure out ways to approach them with love and care. And then the last is just health, mental health and physical health. And we're seeing in my work more and more people, as they wake up to climate change and creation degradation, that they are alarmed, and that anxiety and grief is becoming more and more prevalent for our congregation members. And we're trying to figure out ways to respond and support pastors and congregations as they deal with the mental health crisis that accompanies these health and impacts of climate change.
Thank you for all of that. Clearly, we see all the ways climate change is impacting everything, from our forest health, which impacts the health of our communities, wetlands, heat indexes, migration. Yeah, thank you for naming all of that. My last question for you, Scott, is what is the importance from your perspective of voting with climate and creation in mind this election?
I'm not sure, is voting that important? I don't really think, just kidding. It's very important. I'm a big voter. My first answer is that it's an expression of God's love. And so we are living in a place that allows us to express some power. And that power can be an extension of God's presence in us. So as I've experienced God's presence in singing, in worship services, which I've desperately missed those experiences the way that they used to be, when I have experienced God's presence taking communion in my faith tradition by intinction, where we're tearing bread and dipping in cup, that deep expression of God's love given to me, and then sometimes I'm able to share it with others. My time of being outside in God's creation, I feel a sense of God's presence and mystery in those times, that those senses of awe are very similar to the awe that I experience when I vote. And whenever I begin to engage my political side in a way that is an expression of God's love. And so those are a few things. And then another part is that I have a sense that I'm not only voting for myself, but there are a lot of people that don't get to vote. And so I'm voting for my two children and all people that are below 18 years old. They don't have a vote. For anyone that's conceived today, they won't have a vote. And so I'm voting on their behalf as well. So when I'm looking at candidates, I'm imagining what would it look like for someone to be living in 20 years from now that's being born in 2 years from now. Another is creation, like these forests don't have a vote. The dolphins that I have seen before in the Atlantic Ocean, they don't have a vote. And so could I vote on their behalf? I wonder about the global community. We've had the opportunity to live as a global missions volunteer. And the people that are very much impacted by the policies of the United States do not live in the United States. They don't have a vote. And so if I imagine how could I love my neighbors in Costa Rica, in Brazil, even in North Korea or Russia, how do I cast a vote on their behalf as an expression of God's love? And it's very complicated, but that's what I try to imagine whenever I'm thinking about love. Before I end, I do want to say that some of what Creation Care Alliance has done in the past, not only around encouraging voting, but then also to empower congregations to do this work, is three things. I'll just do a quick little pitch. One is the Creation Care Guide, which is to help faith communities engage in discerning their next steps, because there are so many things that we could be doing to engage in anti-racism work, to engage in poverty work, to engage in climate change work, that congregations are not necessarily equipped to do all of them at the same time. And so how do we help them listen to God's presence in their community to engage in that work in a way that makes sense for that context and those people? So we try to do a little workshop around discerning their next steps. A second thing I wanted to share is that we are working on these ecological grief circles and to respond to some of the pastoral care needs in our communities as people wake up to ecological destruction and climate change. And always there's an integration around how people are being hurt in the midst of that. We don't imagine that dissipating as we work on climate change. So we work on that grief together. So those climate circles are coming, and I'll put these things in the chat as well. And then the last thing is that we just bring people together. And that's one of the things that we do well, is to try to connect not only the green sheep within congregations, but across congregations, so they can find each other, because we do believe we're stronger together. And this is lonely and difficult work. And it's important for us to work together as we can. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And absolutely, this is lonely and difficult work. So collaboration like this is absolutely crucial. And I love, Scott, your call to us to when we vote, think on behalf of those who can't vote. Be they our children, those little ones in our communities, or also those who've had their vote stripped from them, who are no longer able to vote, who were incarcerated and have lost their vote, and those who don't live in our country and do not have a vote. We impact everyone. Our lives are interconnected. So thank you for that call to expand our notion of neighbor and the vote and what it means. Now I'm excited to talk to Rev Glencie Rhedrick. And my first question for you, Rev Rhedrick, is I know that your ministry has been focused on social justice for some time. in past congregational positions at McMinn, and now with your work in the Charlotte Clergy Coalition for Justice. And I just wanted to ask you if you would speak briefly to the connection that you see between social and environmental justice.
Well, thank you for that. But first, I'd like to thank my team of persons that were on the call, Pastor Laticia, Godette, and Reverend Scott Hardin. Really, you've taken most of the words out of my mouth in terms of why we're here today. So thank you so much for your passion and the work that you do, because we're all in it together, even though we feel as if we are sometimes working by ourselves. We are a collective around the nation working to make change and to make sure that everyone understands the importance of justice in everything that we do. And so to your question, I think we might want to just identify or define what environment is. And to make it very simply, we are the environment. So any place that we find ourselves, we become that environment, be it on a social level, on an industrial level, or on a spiritual level. We are the environment. And when we look at the context of the holy word that each of us ascribe to, we have a responsibility to take care of the land. We are the stewards of the land. And when we look at that, it impacts how we live, how we move, and how we go about our being. So we are intersectional, we are inclusive, we are interconnected. We cannot survive without the elements within our air, within the environment. So we are nature, we are social, we are industrial, we are environment.
Thank you. I think so often when we think about creation care, we unfortunately draw a line between human and what we consider to be the natural created order, but we are creatures, we are a part of the environment.
Yeah.
And I love that. I think that's such an important reminder.
And I didn't mean to leave out all of the animals and the plants and the trees and all of that too, but yes, we are all a part of that. We are the circle of life continuum.
Absolutely, right. We are a part of that network, a part of that ecology, and that is such an important reminder.
Yeah.
My next question, Reverend Glencie, is I know that you live in Charlotte, and Charlotte is growing. It is currently the largest city in North Carolina. And what aspects of climate change most concern you in regards to how they will impact urban contexts?
Well, when we think about the definition that I just gave, it impacts greatly. When we have citizens who are living without structural roofs over their heads, that are using the sky as their covering, as their shelter, using the earth as their support system for their grounding, we are a part of that, a part of the problem when it comes to how many persons who are living without shelter. Number two, environmental justice touches on the fact that we are experiencing persons who are being disadvantaged or disproportionately disadvantaged when it comes to healthcare. COVID has been a great eye-opener to show us the disparities within our healthcare system, which also impacts the environment. Once again, when we look at environment in a total sense and not parcel it out and separate it, we find that every aspect of what we encounter impacts us. So if we don't have jobs, that impacts our environment. If wages are low, it impacts our environment. The foods that we eat, the food deserts that we have around us impact our environment. Healthy lifestyles impact, when we don't have that, it impacts our environment. So when we look at it from a holistic standpoint, Charlotte being the largest city in the state of North Carolina has a lot of work to do. We have plenty buildings with no families in it. Even in our building codes, we want to look at how we can build green, how our transportation can be green in order that we can reduce the toxins that are in the air. We also want to be concerned about the homes that do exist, the apartments that do exist that have been built on the top of oil fields, and how that's impacting the health of our community. So when we think about all of that, not only is Charlotte needing to take a closer look, but all of our cities across the country need to begin to take a deeper look. In addition to that, when we look at Charlotte, it has been defined as two cities living within two cities, or the crescent. where we have our population of persons of African descent who are basically centered within a community where resources are lacking. That's another part of our environment. So for me, everything that does not bring harmony, bring parity, bring equality to us impacts the environment.
Absolutely. Thank you. I'm so grateful for you naming the reality for unhoused folks, people who are homeless right now. Climate change impacts them so severely. Yeah, thank you for everything that you just said. I'm very grateful for all of those reminders and the ways that our urban communities will be impacted and are being impacted by climate. My last question, Reverend Glencie, is just how can clergy, you work with Charlotte Clergy Coalition for Justice, how can clergy specifically help to get out the vote and speak to the importance of voting this election?
Well, I'm so glad you asked. My sister did a very good job of answering that question for all of us, but I will also respond. First of all, I think that we need to, our clergy need to go back and revisit the Bible that they so apt to use all the time and to call on all the time. They're missing some passages in the Bible. They're missing the justice passages in the Bible. They're missing the Old Testament text in the Bible of Micah. They're missing Isaiah. They're missing the New Testament text in the Bible, Matthew. We are called to speak on behalf of the people. We have allowed the excuse that we can't get involved with politics, but when you go back and you look at the life of Jesus, Jesus was extremely political, he was revolutionary, and he set the tone for justice. So when we go back and review the scriptures from those lenses, then we understand that voting is a part of the process. We are the caregivers of the community. We are the people who really are like the spiritual doctors. We are the spiritual doctors, not let me say like. We are the spiritual doctors. So therefore, we need to have the same oath as our doctors, nurses, and other healthcare representatives in the hospitals and clinics. We do no harm. And so what does that look like? That looks like that we are educating persons to go to the polls, to exercise their right to vote in order to change some of the very things that we're talking about today. Our economy is suffering. Our environment is suffering. We have people on the street who are suffering from persons who call themselves Christians and are not exhibiting anything of what a Christian looks like. I was listening to a broadcast on yesterday, Dr. Bokesley, I think that's his name, I may be getting it wrong, and he used the term, he said that you cannot say that you believe in Jesus and not believe in justice. And I think that that's a clear message that we need to send. Jesus was concerned about the homeless. Jesus was concerned about the hungry. He was concerned that persons were living without due process, that they were not being able to express themselves. Jesus died for that. You know, we like to glorify his death and talk about how he was raised 3 days on the cross, but we leave out the work that Jesus did. And Jesus was a revolutionary. His killing was a sanctioned killing, which we see in every day in our streets. We need to recognize that those of us who call ourselves Christians, if we're not sure why we're called to do this job, please find something else to do, because our job is to save the lives of those that God has put in our midst to be shepherds over, with, and inclusive as well. So vote, definitely.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Reverend Glencie. Thank you for calling us to look at the life of Jesus, to look at the work of compassion and justice, and to do that work. Thank you again so much.
You're welcome.
I'm now going to pass the torch here to Director of NCIPL, Susannah Tuttle, who's going to speak briefly about the policy that's on the line this election and that's currently happening on the ground in our state.
Well, thank you, Sarah, and I will gladly accept the torch that has been lit as a super fire by these speakers. I am so inspired, and I know we're all tired, but let's get it on. fired up and ready to go. And thank you for all of you using the chat to share resources and information. This is what we're here for. This is, we're a big community. We're all in this together. And we talk about triple the voting and, you know, love what was shared about who we vote for and how we vote for so many when we cast our vote. So just briefly, I want to highlight an environmental justice policy that during our current legislative session of the North Carolina General Assembly, 2 bills, House Bill 1138 and Senate Bill 746, filed in both the House and Senate in North Carolina, seek to improve our understanding of cancer clusters within the state and what environmental factors are contributing to them. These bills are bipartisan and increase funding to the Central Cancer Registry, as well as broaden the ability to monitor doctors who are not fully complying with reporting of cancer diagnoses. It's unclear exactly what is causing clusters of cancers in areas around the state, but it's suspected that some sort of pollutant is contributing to the problem. And Rachel just dropped into the chat an NC Policy Watch article that talks about these 2 bills. So we understand how important it is as we vote, that we understand what the issues are around voting, and NCIPL and North Carolina Council of Churches are here to help you learn to advocate with compassion, build relationships with your elected officials, and we are going, you know, hell or high water, we're going to be engaging with our legislature in this upcoming election cycle, as well as into the upcoming long session and short session that is so critical to our state. So I want to touch briefly also on an incredible event that happened last week when over 200 people from across the Southeast gathered online for the first Faith Communities and Climate Resilience Summit, hosted by Creation Justice Ministries and the Southeast Faith Leaders Network, of which NCIPL is a founding member. As we all know, who we elect this fall will play a vital role in ensuring whether or not communities have access to what they need in order to be climate resilient. We really want people to understand how climate change is impacting our communities right now. And the tools being shared in the chat from our national partner, Creation Justice Ministries, have helped us do that. And I think you'll find the map on creationjustice.org/resilience to be incredible. I have prayed for this map for the last 10 years that I've been in the role of director of NCIPL, and it is here. It shows where our churches are located on the coast and what sea level rise will do over the course of today, tomorrow, the next years, and what we need to do to get ready today and support our coastal congregational communities, inland as well, and through policy making. Finally, keep your eyes out for upcoming events in partnership with our current governor's administration, where NCIPL will be helping congregations and communities develop implementation strategies with the North Carolina Risk Assessment and Resilience Plan that was released earlier this summer. So keep your eyes out for that. We're super excited to break this plan out into issue areas, to hear from frontline communities. The administration is ready to hear from all of you at the community level of how we're going to implement what needs to happen in North Carolina. And we're going to do this no matter what. But again, who we vote for matters. We have to get the vote for. We have the plan in place. Let's do this together. So I'm going to transition back to Sarah as we talk about voter education.
Thank you, Susannah. Yes, so now we're down to how we do this. We talked about why we do this. We talked about all that's at stake in terms of our election, and now we want to talk about how we do this. I've already seen some great resources in the chat from You Can Vote, and that's who I'm going to talk about today. So first, though, I do want to say again, please download and help distribute our voter guide produced by Interfaith, Power and Light, and Faith in Place. This guide was written specifically for congregations. It's multi-faith, it's interfaith, and it can help people of faith as they strive to be intersectional in understanding how these justice issues like climate change, racial justice, and healthcare all come together. We again know that environmental justice and social justice are interconnected. They are one and the same, and this guide can help us make that clear in terms of our vote. That, excuse me, that said, we'll get down to the voting. A reminder, please do fill out your census. That also helps all of the work that we're talking about get done in our state, that resource should be in the link or in the chat now. That link should be in the chat. And I also want to offer some more specific information about voting. So in order to check your registration, You Can Vote has given us a really great resource for that. That should be in the chat now. You can check your registration, update your registration, or get registered, for most people, online. For almost everybody, you can do that online. There's no excuse to not be registered, and that information is now in the chat. We also wanted to let you know that you do not need a voter ID to vote in this election. That has been a question that You Can Vote has gotten repeatedly, and you do not need a voter ID to, or a photo ID, excuse me, to vote in this election. You do not need a photo ID. If you're completing same-day registration, you may need some kind of identification, but you can use a bill, you can use other kinds of identification. You don't have to have a photo ID. I also wanted to let you all know, forgive me while I look at our resources to make sure I'm offering all of the right information. You Can Vote has compiled for us specific climate information that's on the ballot. So that's now in the chat as well. I want everybody to check out how these various offices are on the ballot this election and how they impact climate change. Make sure that you share that link, familiarize yourself with that. Also, a big question this election cycle obviously is vote by mail. Pastor Laticia talked about getting everybody in the vans and getting to our polling places, and that's still really important. We certainly want to do that for those of us who are not immunocompromised and who are safe, but we also know that we are living in a pandemic, and that is a really different reality than any election that we've had in the past. So we want to make sure everybody feels equipped also to vote by mail if that's what they want to do. And you can fill out your vote by mail request form online. You have to fill out a request form. You can either get that sent to you and mail it in, or the online portal will be going live this month. And from that point on, you will not need a paper trail. So you can also learn more about that at You Can Vote's website. I also wanted to share with you that You Can Vote has an online voter guide with all of this information. Again, You Can Vote is an incredible resource. Please do check them out to understand this election cycle better, how to get registered, what's on the ballot, how climate change and other issues are being impacted, and also just to figure out how you can best spread the word of voting in your own communities. In order to do that, you can also complete an online voter empowerment training with You Can Vote. Those happen twice a week. Twice a week, You Can Vote, this incredible organization in our state, is offering online voter trainings that will walk you through all of the things I just said, all of the resources that I just offered, and also provide you an opportunity to really dig deep with a voting expert on those calls. So do also check those out. Those resources are in the chat now as well. And plan to attend our September 9th voter forum. In this series, on September 9th, we will be diving in deeply on democracy rights and voter rights as our focus area. So on that call, we are going to have a representative from You Can Vote, Democracy NC, Action NC, and the League of Women Voters. And if you check out these resources beforehand, complete an online empowerment voter training, you will be really ready to dive in deep with these experts and learn what you need to know at an even deeper level. So we do hope that you'll complete one of those trainings and then come and be with us on September 9th. All of this information will also be sent to you in an email. So you don't have to remember all of this. I'm going to send an email after this call to all of you giving all of these links, but you can also save your chat, your Zoom chat, and have access to those links as well. So I believe now we are going to go to a Q&A, and I know that we don't have a lot of time. We have about 5 minutes, but any questions that you have for our speakers or around voting, we would certainly love to field those to our speakers.
You can go ahead and drop your questions in the chat. And if you want to include your email, considering we are running out of time here, we would love to answer questions. And I know, I believe I should, I will ask that our speakers, if questions are directed to them and you include your email, then we will do our best to provide answers and continue this conversation as well. So if you don't have any questions.
One question, I saw one question, Susannah, and I
Yes.
believe this was during Glencie's portion of the conversation, and it was, how do we help unhoused people vote? What are the barriers there for folks who are living on the streets to be able to vote?
That's an excellent question. I know here in Charlotte, North Carolina, which I'm sure they're following the guidelines of the state. For those who don't have a permanent residence, what they're able to do is to give mark location where they are staying within the community. So they're able to give those boundaries, and they're able to use that as their address to vote. So that's one of the ways.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. That's very helpful. Any other questions as we One question is, how can we help people who don't have internet access? I know that this is challenging, especially as many libraries are closed in the state.
Okay, well, to answer that, they may not have internet access, but we do know that many have cell phones that are smartphones that they're able to utilize, as well as if they are familiar where their Department of, what I'm trying to say, the election board is, that they may be able to go and register. And the other thing is take advantage of early voting, which allows you an opportunity to register and vote at the same time. I know that each city and counties are are faced with challenges as it relates to COVID. So the places that may have been available in the past may be changed. But I would say keep tuned to media to find out where the locations are, and then find your way to an early voting location, register, and then vote.
I would like to add that this is where the faith community needs to be the faith community. Open up these churches that have internet access. Most churches have gained internet access, even if they did not have it, in order to go live on Facebook or YouTube on Sunday morning so that they can air their sermons. Forget the sermon if you cannot open up your doors during the rest of the week. Open up your doors and allow people to come in and use your Wi-Fi. Open up your doors and allow people to come in and use the internet that we have so that we can help bring access and resources to this population. So I say use these church buildings for something productive. And then also, as I already stated, these are also times when we may have to pack people in these vans. We can still practice social distancing, but if they need a ride and we have to make multiple trips, we still need to make sure we're providing multiple ways, access, and resources to get them there. If we can take them to Walmart, Food Lion, Harris Teeter, Publix, Dollar General, Dollar Tree, then they can go and vote and still practice social distancing. Thank you.
Hallelujah on that, Pastor Laticia. That is so important. And I know there was conversations in the chat about having churches be able to allow folks to use their address, use their internet, anything that we can be offering to our communities. This is the living ministry, and all the words that were spoken by these prophetic speakers today is something that I'm going to hold near and dear into every step that I take as we walk towards the polls this season. So I just want to thank everyone again. I often say vote like your life depends on it. And the critical nature of this election makes it clear that this voting literally is a matter of life and death. And we must protect the people and places that we love. So we make the final ask to download our Faith Values Voter Guide, share the link so that others can download the guide, because every download counts. We want to show the people in Washington, D.C. what the faith communities do in North Carolina. And we are grateful to our funders that have allowed us to put all of NCIPL's energies into getting out the vote this season. This is the first time that this program in the 20 years that we've been around have really focused on getting out the vote, and we know why, because it is all about protecting God's creation. And we want to encourage folks next week to plan on attending the next forum on moral health policies. Absolutely critical. It's taking place next week with panelists from Partners of Health and Wholeness, the North Carolina Justice Center, Down Home, North Carolina. So please register for next week's forums and all of the forums. We have 7 more forums. Every single week is going to touch on the different issues that we need to be putting out into our communities. Vote your values. This is so, so important. And on September 9th, we will have an event with expert panelists with You Can Vote, Democracy North Carolina, and other groups in addition to a virtual You Can Vote voter empowerment training. So we're very excited about that. And I know we are 1 minute over, but we must come together as we walk out into the world more inspired, more fired up, ready to go with a closing prayer. So if you'll pray with me. Great Spirit of divinity, help us become advocates of peace, bringing an end to the conflict and division. May we renew our commitment to challenging the causes of injustice, and grant us a spirit of openness to see the good within and around us. Guide us to rejoice in the good we have experienced as we move forward to the future, and help us use our senses to celebrate beauty and creativity in the world. And may we honor all these blessings by getting out the vote. Ashe, aho, shalom, amen.
Amen.
Go in peace.
Amen.
Be safe.
And
Thank you. Pleasure meeting everybody.
thank you for being with us, to all of our speakers and to all of you. We're so grateful you were here.